Florida coast has some of the most sought-after real estate in North America. Living near the water has been a way of life for many and a dream for many more. We seem to be drawn to the water. But this way of life is threatened by that very water. As sea levels rise because of man-made climate change, the rising waters threaten the livability of much of the world's coastlines. Sarasota, Florida is one such place.
I think it's absolutely critical that cities do climate vulnerability assessments and adaptation plans. It's critical that we look at how we're going to be resilient to what the science is saying is going to happen to your city locally.
In 2015, the city of Sarasota started to evaluate if climate change would impact the city's ability to deliver key services.
We're a barrier island, we're a coastal community, so for just being responsible with taxpayer dollars, we felt like we really needed to understand our vulnerabilities and what type of upgrades we need to make over time so that we're resilient to future conditions. Yeah, so I was hired in 2015. The city integrated into the job description, they wanted somebody to look at climate change issues and to develop a vision and a plan around sea level rise adaptation.
You might see Sarasota as just a tourist destination, with the tall condos and the high-end shops and restaurants. But if you dig deeper, you realize that this city is home to about 60,000 year-round residents. Local employment is dominated by healthcare, retail, and the hospitality businesses such as hotels and restaurants. The ocean is a significant part of Sarasota's geography, economy, and culture. And it's on the move.
When you look historically from 1940s to 2017, you can see that we've had about 8 inches of sea level rise here in our region. And that's no future projection. That's just a ruler in the ground, a tidal gauge. That's fact.
Yes, sea level is rising. The largest source of sea level rise is the water that enters the world's oceans from melting land ice. As the planet warms, glaciers and ice fields melt, and the runoff eventually enters the ocean. Much of the excess heat is absorbed by the ocean, where each water molecule undergoes thermal expansion. Earth has more than 1 billion cubic kilometers of ocean, all of it expanding. So what can a city like Sarasota do?
To conduct a really in-depth climate change vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan. And the whole goal of that analysis was really to understand where we were vulnerable as a city and how to upgrade our infrastructure over time. So through the city's climate adaptation plan, we looked at a lot of infrastructure and rated the risk and vulnerability of different roadways and different stormwater infrastructure. And what we have behind us here is one of our most vulnerable intersections to sea level rise and future rain projections. And locals know that when there's a high tide and extreme rain event, this intersection floods. And that's really important because it's a major evacuation route for our barrier island residents. All of our barrier island residents or tourists who go to our beaches, everybody has to go through this intersection to get off the island. So making this intersection more resilient is a really important part of the climate adaptation plan. And I always like to point out how important it is what the city provides for quality of life. We provide wastewater treatment. That's huge, a huge service to the community. But that service in of itself has hundreds of infrastructure and assets that provide this important function. And same with stormwater and our roadways and our drinking water.
The final projections come from the U.S. government's models for climate change. They calculate sea level rise for several scenarios, with the scenarios differing in how quickly humans reduce the production of greenhouse gases. They predict that the sea level rise in 2050 will be between 1 and 1.5 feet. More alarming, by 2100, the sea level rise will be between 3.5 and 6 feet. This approach highlights one important fact. If we fail to start seriously reducing our production of greenhouse gases, the sea could rise higher and quicker. Even in the midst of all of Sarasota's wealth, Over 18% of the city's population is living below poverty, many in low-lying neighborhoods in the city.
Another issue that's very important in climate work is social equity and racial equity, and how climate projections impact historically marginalized communities. And if you look at a lot of especially potential public health impacts with increased heat and those who have lesser means to adapt, I think that's always an important issue to keep on the forefront as you embark on these types of conversations, is who has the resources to adapt and who doesn't.
Climate change is more than science. It's about people.
I think personally, just on my own personal front, I have 2 young kids, and so climate change and future projections are scary, I think, in that scenario. And so for me, going through this process actually made me more hopeful of the future, that for me to have a really strong understanding of what's projected for our area and what that visually looks like and how that will affect our infrastructure. It also made it clear to me where exactly we land on the projections depends on how well we manage our greenhouse gas emissions today. And so another part of my work is doing greenhouse gas inventories and trying to reduce our emissions, not just adapt to what is already kind of locked in. For the city of Sarasota, a lot of our greenhouse gas reduction efforts fall under an initiative called the Ready for 100 initiative, and that is under a target that our city commission set for 100% renewable energy by 2045 community-wide.
Sarasota's plan is sound. Understand the range of climate effects in your locality, work to adapt critical local infrastructure, and start to reduce greenhouse gas production throughout your community. Is your community doing enough?